Wealth Management Forward, the show that teaches accounting firms how to implement wealth management services into their firm. I'm your host, Rory Henry, Director of Business Development. I'm with Rob Santos, CEO of Arrowroot Family Office. Robert, how are you doing today?
Well, Rory, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. So today we're going to talk about the ever exciting topic of estate planning.
Let's do it.
All right. So we're going to cover a couple different topics. One is estate planning and how to implement that into a holistic wealth management strategy. We'll cover probate. We'll also touch on how accounting firms can monetize estate planning. And then we'll answer the question, which I know everybody's going to have, is how can I offer estate planning if I'm not an attorney? Okay. And then we'll also touch on the technological innovations in the space and how to utilize technology. Okay.
Wonderful. Let's do it.
All right. Let's do it. So can you just start out and talk about how estate planning is a component of holistic wealth management?
Absolutely. So we've touched on this on previous episodes, but using that kind of two-step process when meeting new prospects or talking to clients, gathering information, at the beginning, this is a really important aspect of putting together a holistic financial plan or giving good holistic financial advice. So one of those early questions that will be on a questionnaire or during that initial information gathering meeting will always be, do you have an existing estate plan in place? And if so, could we review those documents? And if not, why? This has been historically a difficult conversation to have with folks, both because people don't really like to talk about this, which we're going to touch on later on in the presentation, but secondarily because this is really a realm where estate planning attorneys have, historically been the sole source of good advice in the area. And that can be costly, that can be very difficult time-wise to coordinate with. And a lot of those hurdles are being alleviated. But in order for us to give any kind of financial advice, particularly around either risk reward, or that holistic financial plan, estate planning really does come into play, regardless if someone is closer towards end of life or early in their kind of financial, process as an adult. We think it's something that should be focused on earlier rather than later.
Great. And I think if you can, Rob, touch on the history of estate planning, how this was something that was done by the affluent, and maybe go into the problems people have if they don't have an estate plan. I think of, Succession as a show on TV, or, the movie Knives Out, and how probate can affect a family.
Sure, absolutely. So, there really are a lot of reasons why you want to start focusing on this. As you mentioned, historically, this has been a realm that a lot of affluent families and people have focused on for succession, control reasons, dividing up estates amongst mainly family members. You can use the example of a standard Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner sharing of, food at the table. If anyone has had problems, at those dinner tables, either with disagreements or sharing of things, this is magnified because it involves money.
This family's broken, and that has consequences.
A lot of the affluent have historically had access to estate planning attorneys, had the capital available to address these in a professional way. The business owners, a lot of business owners have more experience in seeing their peers have problems with this, and so have addressed it. Over the last, call it decade or so, I think it's become more commonplace for other folks, affluent, average people and even people that are just getting started in investing to see the value of properly, looking at their estate plan. And, we can look at some of the high profile cases. Just recently, we've spoken about, Robin Williams, who did actually have various stages of estate plans, but it wasn't coordinated or updated, and had a few different families through different partners over the time, and there wasn't a clear, consolidated plan that answered those questions of who gets what and who has control. And we've lived through experience here where if that's not put into place, it really can tear a family apart. So using Robin Williams as a perfect example, there's many others out there that we've heard about in the news, and nobody wants to go through that. It can be very costly if things are not laid out well. Also, it's important to mention that regardless of the dollar amount, who gets what or who has control speaks to other personal aspects, validation of love, trust. And so it touches people's lives and emotions, regardless of the dollar amount. We've seen, people that fight over, furniture items, family heirlooms. It's very, very, very personal. And because of that, it's been very, very difficult for people to focus on that while they're living. It's much easier for them to kick the can down the road, or just not focus on it at all. Today, to bring it to today, there are solutions available for people at varying degrees of net worth that we think are important for people to focus on. And of course, as the focus of this presentation is to show advisors, future-facing advisors, how they can leverage some of those capabilities to broaden their practice and make them more efficient advisors to their clients.
Yeah, I think in fitting into a holistic wealth management strategy, you have to include estate planning, and it allows also accountants to keep these estate plans up to date. So I know we'll touch on shortly about servicing clients with estate plan and having to constantly update these plans when estates change, whether it's assets being bought or sold. So that's just one aspect of where you can constantly monitor this and monetize it through updating a plan.
Absolutely. And it does touch all the different aspects of someone's financial plan. That could include insurance, that could include real assets, liquid assets. It really does touch all aspects of people's financial lives.
Yeah, and it allows you to become the guide for the person and their family and connects generations, and maybe introduces you, the advisor, onto that next generation who may not know who you are, and you can start developing a relationship with them to gain their business as well.
Absolutely.
Okay, Rob, yeah, it makes total sense. And let's touch on probate now and the effects that can have on a family and why having an estate plan is so important.
Sure. So, a little background on what probate is. Probate is essentially a court, a judge, and going through probate in itself can be costly. You need to have an attorney represent you in probate court, or in most instances, you should have an attorney represent you there. And what a probate court does is it will, if there is an estate plan that is not set up through an estate planning vehicle such as a trust, will verify a last will and testament, will verify who has control, will verify what assets there are within that estate and how they're going to be dispersed, who needs to be notified and how are those going to be dispersed, and who has control over those, as well as the costs, who can draw on the estate for costs. Now, all of probate in itself, in a very straightforward manner, if there are all of these instructions laid out, can be pretty straightforward. But in most instances, it's timely. It can take up a considerable amount of time. Courts are backed up with these things. And it also opens up the potential for disagreements, because if there are disputes, probate court is where that is going to be heard. And we've seen a lot of situations where that estate plan wasn't laid out clearly enough. And frankly, the estate, the value of the assets in the estate get eaten up considerably due to those disagreements. So it is not a pleasurable experience for the most part. Also, different states have different probate laws. So depending on what state the assets are in, or where the deceased lived, and where the heirs live, there could be travel costs incurred, and different laws and requirements in various different states. So in a lot of instances for estate planning, this planning can help get around probate court, in particular by putting things into things such as living trusts or irrevocable trusts that do not have to go through probate. So we'll talk a little bit about that later on.
And not to mention the fact that there's family strife when it comes to probate, and the time that could take to go through probate. I think it's also good to mention there's stats out there that say you could lose between 3 to 7% of your assets in probate as well. So
yeah, if not more.
All right, Rob, and let's touch on how accounting firms can monetize this service, even though they're not attorneys. So also touch on the fact that most are concerned about the unauthorized practice of law and how they can go about charging for these services.
Sure. So first and foremost, we think just even a cursory review of some of these documents are important for advisement from the tax side as well as the wealth management side. So that can be included into your tax advisory model or wealth management model. Secondarily, there are multiple ways to monetize, some of these things. As you mentioned earlier, we've seen accountants and financial planning executives be able to offer kind of estate updating services and organizational services. So every year when you're doing those taxes, you can make sure that those assets align with what is listed on the estate plan. And then you can then end up being a conduit to those professionals or some of the technology providers, which we're utilizing, and charge a fee for that organization. What we've seen are a lot of people, once they realize the importance of this, and are more than happy to be able to have someone else confirm that their estate plan is updated, and part of that regular revisitation of either their tax and or financial plan information. So again, we want to be very careful not to represent ourselves as estate planning attorneys. However, similarly, on the financial planning side, we've seen financial planners be able to charge kind of a tax prep fee of organization of documents, double checking of completion of those, and then sending those along to the registered professional to then check as well and incorporate and do the actual legal work or tax work and sign off on that. And in a lot of instances, that can end up being less expensive to the client in an odd way. Can use the example of an estate planning attorney that could be charging anywhere from, call it, $200 to $50 an hour on the low end, up to $500 plus an hour for similar type of organizational work. And we think this is a wonderful opportunity for people that are providing this holistic service to include themselves and become valuable to their end client base by adding these services into things that touch a lot of the aspects of people's financial lives that they're already touching.
Great, Rob. That maybe leads me into the next question, or asking or to touch on is, the technology providers out there and what they can do for an accounting firm as far as getting them to a local attorney, the streamlined process of what they're able to do from a technological standpoint. So if you want to touch on that through our estate planning technology partners.
Absolutely. So this really goes in line with what we've been talking about, which is this, enormous transition and transformation in the marketplace of leveraging some of these tech-enabled services and service providers. There are now accessible to people today, advisors today, both in a white label version or just a referral base, and direct to clients to create an estate plan with varying degrees of sophistication. What we have noticed through our experience, especially for younger generations, millennials, Gen, X and Zers, is that they don't have an estate plan whatsoever. And so, these portals you can invite clients to be able to upload pertinent information directly to them. A lot of the questions that are difficult to answer about health initiatives, who gets what in what instances, heirs, in the instance where a couple has children and they need to find someone that would be the custodian, the legal guardian of their children if anything were to happen to them. A lot of these very sensitive topics, which used to be a lot of the times performed in front of the financial professional, now can be done in the comfort of their own home and at their own pace. And so, we saw a lot of the times when paper-based plans that they would sit on people's desk for sometimes years because they were having a hard time having these conversations. They would lose different parts of the document. Situations would change. And, a lot of times, unfortunately, that plan wouldn't be put into place. These technology providers will help to guide clients as well as you through that process. And as you mentioned, some of these service providers will include set time, call it an hour or more, with an estate planning attorney after going through that process of the portal to confirm what they're doing and why they're doing, or if there's a need for added sophistication. And we think that's really compelling because, again, we aren't attorneys. And at the end, even if that's just an hour to talk about their situation, their goals, and what they're trying to achieve through their estate plan, is really, really vital. The last thing I'd mention is that some of these service providers, the ones that connect you with legal attorneys, will connect you with a vetted professional that it has to achieve a high level of service and professionalism and check all of the boxes, but are also state specific. So, another hurdle that we've seen in previous times is clients that are in states that we maybe don't have a huge amount of clients, and finding a trusted resource within that state that we believe lives up to that fiduciary standard and service in the way that we need for our clients. A lot of these providers give us on the advisory side a greater peace of mind to be able to refer clients to.
Right, and I think the objection that people have is, this is going to take too much time. I'm too busy to do this. When in essence, an hour or two, could save their family potentially months and years of frustration later on in probate. So that's something that now has been streamlined and offered through these technology providers that really makes it ease of use and allows us to provide this service, in a quickly and user-friendly manner.
And cost effectively. If you were looking at 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, a standard estate plan would be anywhere from $2,500 up to $5,000. And what we're finding with some of these new innovations is that a simple estate plan could cost as little as $500 to the client. With that added service of an hour consultation with an attorney, maybe up to $1,500. But when presented to the client about these are real life risks and parts of your financial life that really behoove you to focus on, that comparison and that value add is really compelling. Is really compelling, and it's the right thing to do for your clients.
And that goes back to our family office model of the accounting firm in this aspect being that general practitioner or that quarterback, and getting the client over to the right service provider and quarterbacking them to make sure they're having the best service possible. So one, it allows you to become that trusted advisor even more so. It also helps out with the trustworthiness and transparency in these platforms as well is great. As far as the service.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think I want to touch on, again, I know we spoke about the different generations, but with the next 30 years, a transfer of wealth, where they're calling it the great transfer of $68 trillion being passed on, how important is this to start adopting as a service if you are an advisor?
It's tremendously important. How these assets are held will greatly determine the taxation of them. In the instance of, call it real estate, which happens quite often, if these aren't held in trusts, they may need to be sold in order to be able to pass those along to their heirs. By utilizing some of these estate planning, pretty straightforward methods, you can alleviate the needs to, realize capital gains or income taxes in a lot of instances. As the world goes forward, taxes seem to be getting higher, not lower. And so we're seeing a lot of folks, the major affluent, as well as regular people, take a good look at what those assets are. And, through that spectrum of looking through to make sure that there's control and division and proper instructions left for if and when anything were to happen. Also looking at that through the tax advantages, which we think is really compelling to accountants that are adopting this new tax advisory model.
I agree. And I want to touch on, why people generally update an estate plan, or would need to be introduced to an estate plan, thinking of a birth of a child, or, a diagnosis of a significant other, or a parent. Can you go into why people either start adopting a plan or need to adjust their plan?
Absolutely. Life events usually end up triggering a need for estate plans. So you just mentioned a few of them: the birth of a child, a divorce, a family member that is close to the end of life, and there's no estate plan put in place, and a mad dash to try to get one in place before that family member is to pass away. We also see it for business owners, in particular around business owners that want to pass along the business to their heirs, or looking for tax efficient ways to structure that ownership if they were to ever sell those businesses. So there's a lot of reasons getting married and joining of assets. There's a lot of reasons why people should focus on it. And we think, this is a wonderful point to bring up, because everybody's going through some kind of phase of this at some point, even if, students that are just graduating out of college maybe don't have a lot of assets, but are starting to save their retirement plan. a basic estate planning technique there is, providing proper beneficiaries on their 401k retirement accounts, and to make sure that that gets passed through without having to go through probate. So anyone in any aspect of their life really should be focusing on it for all of those various reasons.
Yeah, I want to touch on the fact that many attorneys who have done the estate plans in the past are less in tune with updating these estate plans because there's a conflict of interest. Updating these plans, if they do it for one client, they have to do it for all the clients. So that becomes an issue. It's an opportunity for accounting firms and wealth managers to go in there and take that mantle and be able to be that quarterback with the estate plan and update them. And because a lot of this stuff is already at your disposal as far as assets and financials.
Absolutely. And again, you'll see, using our paradigm of offensive versus defensive, most estate planning attorneys, as you just mentioned, will wait to hear from their clients if it needs to be updated, and will not be proactive around that for lots of different reasons, conflicts of interest reasons, but also because it may not be a huge part of business for them.
Right.
And so, financial advisors, accountants that are so close to the client can have that conversation and incorporate it into their business model because it makes sense, but it's also a way of becoming a better advisor, and also potentially furthering your revenue streams.
I agree. So taking that discovery meeting in incorporating estate planning as part of this holistic wealth management strategy, as well as also a tax planning strategy, can benefit you, the firm, as well as the client, and utilizing technology as well. I think, as we've illustrated, Rob, just taking that hour or two for a client to fill out these questionnaires will save their family a lot of strife. Nobody wants to buy estate planning. It's sold, but it's needed, just like insurance.
Absolutely. And the absolute worst time to focus on these things is right when it's needed. There's a lot of problems with that, either not being formed or notaries needed to be there to execute. But in the example of business owners, we get approached a lot of times from business owners who are about to sell their company. They got a term sheet, somebody came and they're excited. They're about to sell their company, and they'll come and say, well, what do we need to do for estate plan before we sell this company? And the short answer is, if we had had this conversation 10 years ago or 5 years ago, we would have had a much better ability to structure the corporate structure and use your estate plan to help make this more tax efficient than the final hour before you're supposed to do a deal. A lot of accountants on the call know that the IRS is not happy when there's a whole lot of changes right before they're going to get a big check worth of money to try to decrease that tax liability of selling the company. So for business owners, for wealthy, for families, again, similar in line with why you want to get started with your financial plan and investing early, your estate plan, there are a whole lot of reasons why you want to start earlier rather than later.
All right. So it's good to start earlier rather than later. The accountant already has that business owner as a client. So you get that future focused mindset and be able to plan properly. And once you have these estate planning tools, you'll better be able to advise the client and then set them up for future success. That's what I think I heard you say there, Rob.
Absolutely. I would just say that, for those folks that are interested in doing some of this, and again, are a little bit scared or daunted by the aspect of including this into their advisory model, please reach out. We can help make it more transparent and show you the way to implement this at your firm.
Yes, it's not that hard. It's quite easy once you get the hang of it, right, Rob?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rory. Talk to you later.